Continuing our little dawdle around the environs of Leicester Square, we stopped for a quick refresher at this grand institution alongside the Noel Coward Theatre on St Martin's Lane. It's not a bit of fake heritage. The Salisbury stood here since 1899 and remains a magnificent example of a late Victorian boozer. It's attracted its share of celebs. Elizabeth Taylor celebrated one of her 2 marriages to Richard Burton here, while in 1964 Marianne Faithfull was famously photographed for this album cover. You can see more from that photo shoot hanging in the nearby National Portrait Gallery. With all this etched and polished glass, carved wood and gleaming brass, the Salisbury has of course appeared on screen, in films starring the likes of Dirk Bogarde, Laurence Olivier and Maggie Smith. In keeping with its over-the-top appearance and its position in the heart of the West End, the Salisbury was very much a theatrical bar, gay or gay-friendly throughout much of its history. And that's the reason for its most famous screen appearance, Basil Dearden's Victim in 1961, the first British film to use the word homosexual. Homosexuality was still strictly outlawed, and the film's plot, dealing with the blackmail of otherwise respectable men over their sexual orientation, is generally credited with helping to change the law some 6 years later, in 1967. Discretion with recognisable locations was understandable, so in the film the pub was renamed the Checkers, but the location on St Martin's Lane and its unmistakable appearance clearly identify it, although a couple of inconsistencies indicate that the pub's interior was recreated in the studio. The previous year, the Salisbury's real interior was seen in Tony Richardson's film of John Osborne's successful play The Entertainer, with Laurence Olivier recreating his stage success as the washed-up northern musical comic Archie Rice. The Salisbury is a theatrical bar visited by Archie when he ventures down to London in a desperate attempt to relaunch his ageing dad's stage career. The Salisbury's high camp stylings made it the perfect setting for Maggie Smith's eccentric turn in Travels with My Aunt, so it's not surprising that famously gay director George Cukor chose it as the bar above which she lives in his 1972 film of Graham Greene's novel. More recently, it's one of the bars visited during Chris O'Dowd's boozy stag night in Richard Curtis's The Boat That Rocked. Rather sneakily, the Salisbury's exterior under its real name is fleetingly glimpsed in Victim as Bogarde makes his way to St Martin's Court. It's not been a gay bar since the early 80s and now caters to theatregoers who want to experience the splendour of a proper Victorian pub. Across St Martin's Lane, you can't miss this, though you might not immediately know what it is. It's the constantly revolving door of the St Martin's Lane Hotel. Designed by Philip Stark, it's far too cool to need anything as passé as a sign. It was from this hotel, in Matthew Vaughan's Layer Cake, that a pre-Bond Daniel Craig was abducted in a laundry basket after a spot of afternoon delight with Sienna Miller. A little further down St Martin's Lane is the tiny opening of Brydges Place. It's the second narrowest alleyway in London. Now remember that fact for later. Towering over St Martin's Lane is the globe topping the Coliseum Theatre, home now of the English National Opera. You can see this illuminated when Richard Widmark hurries across St Martin's Lane on his way to the seedy Silver Fox nightclub in 1950 film noir Night in the City. Yes, the little alleyway is real, though hardly anyone seems to notice the unremarkable doorway, which leads to a wonderful but overlooked little gem. With bow-fronted windows and wall-mounted lamps, Goodwin's Court is one of the few places that really does resemble the set for an old black-and-white Sherlock Holmes adventure. It wasn't used as Harry Potter's Diagon Alley, as many people seem to think, but it was featured in another recent fantasy film. Back up and let's take a look in daylight. Do you recognise it? From Mary Poppins Returns, as Mary, Jack and the kids go to get the Dalton bowl fixed. Here, The tiny door to Topper Trepolovsky's Fix-It shop was built for the movie underneath the real Bedfordbury sign. This place is the real deal, with some of the houses dating back to the 1690s. But surely that nondescript doorway on St Martin's Lane used by Richard Widmark wasn't the way Mary Poppins entered the court. Well, of course not. There's a little cinematic sleight of hand to provide Goodwin's court with a more photogenic entrance. To see that, we need to carry on through to Bedfordbury itself and then turn south toward the rather more imposing entrance of another narrow passageway. Under the period set dressing used to take this corner of London back to the 1930s was the Thai Pot restaurant. Once in the passageway itself, it's easy to see why the charming Goodwin's Court was chosen over this more workaday thoroughfare, although this alleyway too has been featured on screen. It's where Henry Golding begins to show Emilia Clarke around the city's hidden corners in Last Christmas. He explains that this is the narrowest lane in London, but as you now know, it's not. It's the second narrowest. In the film, they continue down here and pop out to see the tiny sculpture of two mice, which is actually a couple of miles away in the city of London. Brydges Place, as we saw, opens onto St Martin's Lane. From here, we'll return to Bedfordbury and we'll head north. Remember David Garrick, after whom the theatre was named? Well, here's a street named after him too. And this, one of London's grand old gentlemen's clubs, the Garrick. It's strictly members only, but one unlikely person to be found downing a Boilermaker here was John Wayne, as the rough, tough Chicago cop posted to London to extradite an American mobster in the Duke's only British film, Brannigan, in 1975. That's the one where he... Yeah, that one. This is a rare screen appearance for the Garrick Club, which traditionally doesn't allow cameras, and only participated because Richard Attenborough, who plays the Metropolitan Police Chief, happened to be a member. Cheers, darling. The club relaxed its rules again in 2006 for another long-standing member, Peter O'Toole. A pair of fruitily aged thespians, O'Toole and Leslie Phillips, reminisce here about minging Ophelias and bloody Peter Hall over a drink or two in Roger Mitchell's Venus. O'Toole was rewarded with his amazing 8th and final Best Actor Oscar nomination. And, for the 8th time, he lost out to someone else. Founded in 1831 as a civilised retreat for actors and literary types, the Garrick's members included Charles Dickens, who famously became involved in a feud with fellow writer William Makepeace Thackeray. When they weren't feuding, both Dickens and Thackeray enjoyed a hearty meal nearby on Maiden Lane. And although the Garrick remains exclusive, anyone can book a table at Rule's restaurant. Established by Thomas Rule in 1798, it's claimed to be the oldest restaurant in London. Specialises in such traditional British food as jugged hare, game birds, oysters, pies and puddings. Apart from writers such as John Galsworthy, H.G. Wells and Graham Greene, its clientele has included actors Laurence Olivier, Buster Keaton, Stan Laurel, Charles Lawton, Clark Gable and Charlie Chaplin, as well as this guy. Well, you wouldn't expect M to be queuing up for a bargain bucket at KFC, would you? Now, we're getting into Covent Garden. No, that's not Covent Garden. That's Warner Brothers Studio in Burbank. That's Covent Garden. But that's for another day.